Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 8th of July 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, the weather, the best we can do today is we've just had a post in our chat box to say that it's pretty grey in the middle. I think that means the middle of England. Everywhere else is looking about as bad. So it's pretty blustery, pretty chilly. Some places are dry at the moment. But we have had some pretty heavy showers across UK. What can we say? Welcome to summer in the United Kingdom. Keep smiling.
Well, I guess that pretty much sums up the budget, actually, which the speech is being given right at this moment. So unfortunately, I'm missing half of it. But I can tell you a little bit about it because George Osborne is delivering his budget. And it's a budget which he says puts economic security first. He was absolutely, in his first line, basically he said security is the key of this budget. I wasn't clear whether that was security for the bankers or whether in fact he was talking about security in the sense of the security services. Wasn't really sure what he meant by that, but he kept saying things like that this was a new settlement, that it's a one nation budget for a one nation. So it's all about keeping the country together, of course. And he's going to deal with the deficit through asset sales. So that's brilliant. He's really crowing about how much of the UK's assets have already been sold. Of course, he mentioned the fact that they were reselling the bank shares that they own. But nonetheless, the asset sales was a pretty key point. One nation government again. And of course, he's going to bring Britain back into the black. I'm not quite sure how he's going to do that. But anyway, I don't think he really knows how he's going to do it. And of course, he was mixing up the whole notion of national debt and the budget deficit as sort of being the same kind of thing. And that if we get the budget back into surplus, then that means we're back in the black. Well, of course, we're not. We still owe shed loads of money. Now, of course, we have the principle in this country that no parliament can bind its successor. But what he's basically announced today is that all future governments will be required under normal circumstances to maintain a surplus. So no more budget deficits go into the future. All future chancellors are going to have to justify ever having a budget deficit again. I think there's some debate about what that means. HMRC is going to be given loads more powers to deal with tax cheats. And perhaps this is... He said it with a straight face, despite the fact that this article was published today. So they are giving something like £850 million more to the HMRC to deal with offshore tax evasion. So it is a real shame that for Osborne that this was published today, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is Mr. Osborne's family wallpaper business, which has been selling off a bit of property in London and using a Virgin Islands offshore.
Well, they sold it to the Virgin Islands offshore company, and that company has made a lot of money out of the deal, and they took £6 million in that sale, so that building would be split up into flats, basically. It's, of course, both the Channel 4 News here and the Independent have said there is no suggestion that the Chancellor or Osborne and Little avoided any tax in the deal.
Yeah,
but nonetheless, they were quite happy to deal with a company that was avoiding tax in that way. So, anyway, that's basically all I saw of the budget before we had to come on air, so yet to see what is going on with regard to tax credits and other things. So
see how much pain actually comes out of it.
Yes, indeed. Well, in the States then. This is Elizabeth Warren, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and she and three others, Maria Cantwell, John McCain and Angus King, have reintroduced their legislation to bring back Glass-Steagall into the Senate. And she said yesterday the biggest banks are collectively much larger than they were before the 2007-2008 crash, and they continue to engage in dangerous practices that could once again crash our economy. The new Glass-Steagall Act will rebuild the wall between commercial investment banking and make our financial system more stable and secure. Well, just as a reminder to anybody that hasn't heard of this before, the Glass-Steagall Act was introduced in 1933 in the United States following the Great Depression. It forced banking institutions to make a decision about the type of banking they wished to pursue. So it was recognised at the time that it was a combination of high street retail banking and investment banking. which had caused the financial collapse in the 1930s. So by keeping these two banking functions separate, the impact on the real economy of any losses incurred as a result of casino activities of the merchant banks was minimal. So nonetheless, the banks have been campaigning vigorously over the past decades to have Glass-Steagall repealed, and that was eventually achieved in 1998 under the Clinton administration. Now that's in the United States. In the UK, we had a slightly less formal arrangement, which was dealt with by Margaret Thatcher when she brought in the so-called Big Bang. That removed our equivalent to Glass-Steagall, and that removed any separation between commercial banks and merchant banks. So today, the Western world is in a position where so much money is owed to the financial system by governments, businesses, and individuals that the banks' claims can never actually be paid, no matter how much austerity is imposed, no matter how many people are killed by collapsing standards of nutrition or healthcare, and so on. And indeed, the so-called debt is many times the productive value of the entire planet. So there's no prospect that the real economy could pay this debt down either. So since the banks who've lent all this money have made bets upon bets on top of the loans that they've made, they have in fact bankrupted themselves. So while many people have over the years warned of the position the banks are in, and leading up to the 2007-2008 crash, of course, banks themselves and financial commentators continue to deny it. But as Ian Crane pointed out on Monday night's Humanity versus Insanity, the bailouts that the banks themselves required in 2008 far outstrip any bailouts, for example, required by Greece. So that's the European banks. Barclays, $868 billion. This is equivalent to the Greek bailout. The Greek debt is $300 billion, and just look at how much the European banks took as a result of bailouts. And there's the United States banks that produced these tables. So this is pretty fantastic. Of course, these banks aren't being asked to pay back these bailouts, are they?
Well, of course not.
No, of course not. Of course, as this is what Ian was pointing out, but bailouts are no longer considered acceptable. So in other words, governments and banks know that they can't get away with it anymore. So the new term we've had to learn is the rather stupid term of bail-in. And this is where instead of banks stealing from the taxpayer, they steal from the taxpayer. After all,
Sorry, Mike, I just...
the question is, aren't the bank depositors also taxpayers? Well, maybe not all of them. We'll just bring that up again for the sake of completeness. In time for the coming bail-ins required for the bankrupt banks, of course, the Bank of England has reduced the level of deposits covered by Britain's deposit guarantee scheme. They've dropped it from £85,000 to £75,000. So, as we said, following the 2007-2008 crash, there are many calls for banks to be split up. Sadly, the Treasury Select Committee here didn't have the guts to do it, and then they brought in a ring fence instead. Now, this keeps the banks in their too big to fail condition, but it supposedly prevents any cross-contamination between commercial and investment banking operations. And of course, the answer to that is, yeah, right. So to reiterate, the so-called debt which is owed is many times greater than the productive value of the entire planet. So there's no prospect of the real economy paying this off. The only option is to write off the debt. This applies to Greece equally. But in order to do that, the banks have to be split up. There is not really any choice in that. And once that's done, the commercial banking services which support the real economy can be protected. The investment banks lose the stranglehold that they claim to have over the rest of us, and they can be allowed to fail. So we have to applaud the efforts of Elizabeth Warren and her colleagues to reinstate Glass-Steagall in the US. Keep the pressure on to see that it's try to see if it can be implemented in full here in the UK. The banks, of course, will fight tooth and nail to prevent that happening. And the question is, do we intend to let them?
Well, it's quite an amazing situation. We haven't heard a lot on the BBC about these basic facts of the conditions of the bank. So where's the great Robert Peston been? He'll just be commenting on what George Osborne tells him to say, presumably.
Yes.
But we've got a solution in front of our eyes with Bradbury Pound, reinstatement of the Bradbury Pound, take the whole power away from the corrupt international banks, reintroduce our own currency, as credit as opposed to a debt-based system, and separation of the banks, as Mike's been talking about, and we are well on our way to sorting the situation out. So it's remarkable that the great British broadcasting company, with all of its wealth of researchers and experts and economists, can't actually work out the simple fact that there is criminal activity by the international banks, but there is a solution. We'll just keep going, I think, is the answer. I'm almost smiling because I don't know what to say anymore, because I think it's obvious we're now watching fraud and corruption amongst the international banks on a massive scale, facilitated, of course, by David Cameron's Conservative government. Security for the banks.
Well, this brings us nicely onto Greece again, because, of course, the European summit took place yesterday, and they were talking about it again this morning. So this is Donald Tusk, who, ex-Polish Prime Minister, he's currently one of Europe's presidents, because Europe needs more than one president, as you would imagine. And he is, again, reminded Greece that there's a deadline for them to present a new reform plan. And he continued by making the usual threats. He said that if Greece would not reach a deal, it could lead to its bankruptcy. Now, it's interesting that he was threatening Greece in this way, because Cameron, in Prime Minister's Questions this afternoon, was also threatening Greece. He said that he fears for the future of this country. He's delivered in quite a threatening way. So I'm not quite sure exactly what he meant for that, but he certainly fears for the future of that country. And Tusk, anyway, getting back to Tusk, he said that if no compromise is found in the next 4 days, then all parties would suffer. Hopefully the European Union a bit more than Greece. But anyway, Tsipras, on the other hand, making his statement, he said, "I wanted clearly understood the proposals of the Greek government on financing its obligations and debt restructuring won't come as a new burden for a European taxpayer. Let's be honest, the money that was given to Greece has never reached the Greek people. That was the money to save Greek and European banks." And he also said that the country needed a solution that would allow it to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But at the end of the day, going back to what I said during the Glass-Steagall thing, it doesn't really matter what happens with Greece here, because it isn't going to solve anything. The debt is too huge. Whatever agreement is made with Tsipras, whether people see that Tsipras and Varoufakis have capitulated or have given in, or perhaps we're working for the other side, at the end of the day, it's irrelevant, because the scale of the problem is just so huge that it doesn't make any difference what happens at this point.
Yeah, well, somebody in the chat room has said, where can you find information about the Bradbury Pound and what can it do? Well, the answer to that is go to UK Column website and simply just put Bradbury into the search box.
Well, you don't even have to do that. Just scroll about halfway down the front page and you'll find the Bradbury Pound ebook.
Of course.
Yes.
So that's one book with a simple explanation as to what it is. But of course, the main advantage with the Bradbury Pound, it's real. We had a communication from the Treasury a little while ago which indicated that it was still real, even though you can buy one on eBay if you go looking for them. But
just to clarify, what the Treasury actually said was that you're not allowed to reproduce the Bradbury Pound in any way, because in a form of a graphic, because that would be effectively counterfeit. So there you go.
So there we are. The Treasury very, very nervous about any talk of the Bradbury Pound, simply because the Bradbury Pound reinstated would cut out the corrupt international banks overnight. Well, let's come back to George Osborne, because really what a very disgusting and unpleasant man this is. I've used the word obscene here because he's standing, of course, delivering a budget of pain, as it's been described. But how do the Tories label themselves? Well, here we've got a brighter, more secure future. What's Osborne been doing on the sidelines? Well, basically, he says that if you've been a hero in the military, he's going to give you another £10,000. So if you've got a major medal at the moment, you get about £2,000 a year annual stipend, and that's going to be increased now by £10,000 as basically a thank you for defending this utterly corrupt, fraudulent government. So this is sickening stuff. This is not even the crumbs off the table for people who've stood up to defend their country, suffer death or injury, and here he is just making a mockery of the whole thing. And if that's not enough, of course, we've recently had the Parachute Regiment veterans marching on Downing Street. They were trying to get a medal for Corporal Stuart McLaughlin, who was killed in the Falklands. Now, he'd carried out some heroic acts, but he was then killed by artillery fire shortly after those brave deeds. The Paras and many other veterans would like to see him with a medal, but of course the MOD has said, well, we can't really grant a posthumous medal and go away, which is pretty standard for this government. So it's just obscene the way this Conservative government is acting. And it isn't just people overseas that are being brutalised. We're now seeing it with our own veterans. But of course, the government's got plenty of time and effort for medals for people such as this gentleman, Mr. Saville. Of course, he put great effort into serving his country, looking after people's children. And it was David Cameron who had to backtrack and say, well, we couldn't possibly take his medal away. It is just really bad, Mike, isn't it? I smile. I'm not laughing. It's a wry smile. What can you say when you look at the facts sort of on the screen in front of you? So let's bring in a new Conservative MP. Here he is, crowing all over the front page of the Plymouth Herald. Ex-military Tory MP Johnny Mercer. What have we got to say about him? Well, making a mockery of the military veterans because he sold his soul to produce a steamy shower scene in which he lathers himself in Dove soap, and apparently this has made him some money as a commercial. So he isn't out there on the streets helping the veterans who are living on the streets. He's busy soaping up with sweet-smelling toiletries in order to make a bit of money.
There's no narcissism in that, is there?
Well, quite a lot, Mike, actually. So probably he was selected as a Tory party candidate by the Briggs-Meyer test, which pointed out this is the sort of man that will sell his soul for a bar of Dove soap. Well, what's the next target for the Chancellor? Well, it's got to be students. And we have commented on the student loans company before, but let's see where it takes us today. So according to the Mail, Osborne takes the axe to student grants to find 1.6 billion savings, handouts to be replaced with loans paid back after graduation. Now, to me, this seems to be a respin. Let's just read the text here. Student grants will be axed and replaced with loans. Sajid Javid, the business secretary, has been working on plans for the grants worth up to £3,387 per year this September to be paid back after a student graduates, which is exactly the system that's been in place up till now. So I think this is reworking of the old system as if it's something new, but it isn't really. And of course, what does it come down to? That students are being put into debt before they've started their working lives. And the Students' Loan Company, very interesting organisation. Let's delve. Well, here we are, a nice tree logo, always a good sign, matching the Conservative Party, of course. And what do they say? Well, it says it's a non-profit making government-owned organisation set up in 1989 to provide loans and grants to students in universities and colleges in the UK. Well, it goes on. The Students' Loan Company works with local authorities in Wales, Student Hire Awards Agency for Scotland, Education Library Boards of Northern Ireland, Higher Education Institutions, and HM Revenue and Customs to provide student support. It goes on in this document to say it also provides loans for European students. So you might be interested in that as a British taxpayer. If you have a look at their own documentation, you start to see some huge sums of money being moved around. Encourage you to see this yourself. And in very glossy graphics on their corporate brochure, you'll find a pyramid of power, which, well, actually, Mike, it fails to mention anything to do with students or education.
Vision, mission, value. What is the point of this triangle?
Well, it's a very glossy document in which the student loans company sets out in great detail how the students loan company is going to run its own company to its entire satisfaction. I think you're in for a surprise as we work through this, but there is no mention of really supporting students. This is to do with a company which has got vast amounts of money invested. Well, let's have a look at people, because that's a key point. We've got the chairman here. We'll just have a little look at what he's been saying. He says that he was pleased to join the Students' Loan Company, and they're looking at a vision to be valued as a digital customer-focused centre of excellence. So that's all good. Down in the small print here, it says something remarkably interesting. It says that their loan book is becoming a significant national asset. So never mind the students, the debt that those students are now carrying on their backs is a significant national asset. So never mind building ships or steel or coal mines, debt is a significant national asset. And let's give you a bit more detail. They've got 6.6 billion going into maintenance loans and grants, 5.9 billion to hire and further education providers, and their loan book has got a value of 62 billion. So that's a loan book of debt around the necks of British young people. This is nothing about helping young people establish themselves in lives, educate themselves and get jobs. This is about locking people into debt slavery, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Well, can you have a look at some of this yourself? Do the easy stuff. Company Check here starts to pull up some figures on what they're talking about. Net worth of, oh dear, minus 33 million, according to that check. But you look as though you're about to say something.
I'm puzzled. I'm puzzled how they, since they're clearly doing so well, I'm puzzled how they seem to have £26 million worth of liabilities.
It is tricky, isn't it? But I'm sure George Osborne's got it all under control. Here's the non-executive chair, Christian Brodie. What sort of man would he be? Well, he's currently the chair of the council at the University of Sussex, and he retired in July 2013 from role of the vice chairperson of UBS Investment Bank. So we've got an ex-banker leaping in to ramp up the debt on young people. But it does get better. We found this lady, Professor Dame Glynis Breakwell, and she's a psychologist with a distinguished academic background, specialising in research on leadership, identity processes, risk communication, and military cultures. So I'm not quite sure why she would want to be close to the Students' Loan Company.
Well, because the people, anybody that may want to avoid paying back that debt, obviously identity is a large part of that process. Now, they work very closely with HMRC to make sure that as soon as you earn over a certain threshold, that your loan repayments are automatically taken out of your salary at source.
Yeah.
So that's why she would be, they're particularly interested in making sure that they have people properly identified when the loan is given in the first place, and also at any point that somebody may obtain a job in the future because they got to pay it back.
Well, I think that's a reasonable start. Let's follow on through the happy smiling faces. We've got another one here. This is Michael Wheel, chartered accountant, 20 years of experience, director of finance in the higher education. Previously worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers and KPMG. So there's more of the famous model. And a non-executive director of Alder Hey Children's NHS Foundation Trust, where he chaired the audit committee. If you're not too happy about him, we might like to have a look at Rob Kennedy. What's he been up to? Well, European Director of Finance at Optus PLC, a listed medical device company. So you don't think possibly, Mike, that the idea of trawling through all the students' data is to make sales opportunities for other companies?
I thought perhaps if any students are identified as not paying the money back, might be used for medical research.
Yeah, if you're a student, don't go sick. But here's where you hit the nail on the head, Mike, because we've got Paul Mason, appropriate title maybe, What's his job? His focus is on the delivery of a secure and accurate repayment service for our 5 million customers. No mention of students. They are just customers of yet another banking system. And this man's job, I believe, is to act as Mr. Heavy to make sure those students don't get away with not paying the stuff back. So this is Britain's young people being put straight into debt by this criminal Conservative government. And let's just remind ourselves of that lovely lady. Why do they need a psychologist qualified in leadership, identity processes, risk communication and military cultures? Here she is. Well, if you have a look at some of the other stuff they say about themselves, oh, I beg your pardon, let me just come back to that. Let me see whether I can call it up. In the middle of that, where the arrow is, it's talking about improving the collective sponsorship of and support for the transformation program. And I think this is really where this lady is heading, because if you read their corporate documentation, they are talking about transforming the whole of the student loans company. They're talking about a customer base. They're talking about making sure they don't miss any debts. This is a big fishing exercise for young people. And if you would like to know who's running all of this interesting organisation, go on Company Check and you can find all the directors listed. And there's some fascinating people there, because one of them, you will see, Mr. Robert Anthony Kennedy. He's been involved with 20 current or dissolved companies, as you do, really. You can have a look at what those are. There's a lot of the beef industry. He's been quite big in. Dundee University Project Management, Dundee Student Villages. So presumably if the students get enough loans, they can take a house in the student village.
It's fair enough if he's been working in the beef industry, because after all, people are being farmed.
They are being farmed. But it's not only beef, because you can see that he was big in New Zealand Lamb Shops Limited. So beef industry, lamb and students.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm sorry this data is a bit old because it's back from 2010. But if you have a look at the sorts of salaries these people are on, this is low grade. This is not the top directors, but a head of service back in 2010 was picking up a cool £83,000, and they employ about 2,000 people on the back of our young people. So we'll finish on this note here. Here's the company structure. And this is the bit I wanted to highlight: improving the collective sponsorship of and support for the transformation program, and reflecting the growing importance of the loan book as a significant national asset. So that's pretty good. And then down at the bottom, create a structure to help deliver the government SLC digital agenda. So I think this is where the psychologist fits in, because the government wants all of these students absolutely databased to the last detail. Well done, the Conservatives, because obviously it is going to be a budget of pain, and what better place to start the pain than for our young people that represent the future. We better end there, I suppose, with...
Well, with Mark Anderson. I recorded this yesterday afternoon. Mark is still in a unfortunate time zone, so it's difficult for him to come on live these days. But yesterday we had a chat, a sort of follow-up, because the last time we had him on he was still in Austria at Bilderberg.
Yeah.
So we're following up on that, and also on the free trade deals, TPP and the TTIP. So if I can just press the right button here, we'll play this video, and we'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Before you press the button, Mike, I would just say thank you very much to people who are still sending in donations for Melanie Shaw. It's enabled her to have proper accommodation. It's enabled her to have new sets of clothes and other basic things which she needs. We also appreciate the books that have been sent in recently. Very interesting. We've had a Bible in the last couple of days, and we've also had a Quran. And I think this is most encouraging, because it shows that we've got a wide selection of the community watching. So thank you very much for that. And please keep giving your support. Thank you.
Okay, so here's my interview from yesterday with Mark Anderson. So after a few weeks break, we are pleased to welcome Mark Anderson back to the program. Hello, Mark. How are things with you?
Oh, fine. It's been tiring lately covering Bilderberg, getting home, but everything's good.
Well, indeed, that's where we're going to start. So obviously, we haven't spoken to you since you were in Austria at the Bilderberg conference. You've probably been publishing quite a bit of stuff since then in American Free Press, of course. Here's one of your articles, Bilderberg Syndrome and American Friends of Bilderberg. And it's always nice to have that group of faces on screen.
Yes.
So what is the update? You must have a much clearer idea of what has happened since Bilderberg and what kind of policy has come out of that conference this year.
Yeah, it was quite a ride. I mean, I'll mention briefly that on the Sunday that they were wrapping up, most of them had already left, and that Bilderberg Syndrome article is briefly about the fact that me and other members of the press were thrown out of the hotel that they had just met in, even though they had all presumably departed. And I'll mention as a side note that there were large bags of shredded paper and half dismantled computers in this utility room at Hotel Interalpen there in Telfs, Austria. And police were seen putting out the garbage for the hotel. How often do you see police putting out a hotel's garbage, correct? These are just footnotes in my travel itinerary, you might say, my diary, leading into a more meatier discussion here, more meat about what they were talking about. And clearly Greece was one of their topics, and now we see what's happening to the Greeks as the Bilderberg-connected IMF puts the screws to the Greeks.
So sorry, just on that subject, Mark, I mean, have you got any thoughts about what's happening in Greece at the moment? Last night, we do a program on a Monday evening. Last night, Ian Crane had William Engdahl on the program, really suggesting that in his opinion, Varoufakis always intended, or at least he intentionally destroyed any credibility that the Greek ruling party has at the moment. And that he's now done his job and left, and really left a bit of a mess behind. What's your thoughts on Greece, actually?
Yeah, I think Engdahl is right. He had an article on, I believe it was on henrymacko.com. He's a Canadian blogger. And then there's Martin Armstrong and others who think that on the one hand, it's great that the Greeks said no to the austerity, which is basically akin to saying no to Bilderberg. But on the other hand, there was no real alternative in place. And Paul Craig Roberts, a former Treasury official in the U.S., also concurs, and he's very credible as well, that they said no for the right reasons. But now no one is saying, for instance, that Greece could have its own Bradbury pound, if you will, a sovereign, debt-free currency that could take the place of the euro and the eurozone and put the Greeks back on a sound footing. And so on the one hand, they said no. On the other hand, it's kind of a vacuum where this could have been a trick played on the Greeks to let them vent their frustration, but then allow them no viable alternative to the euro and the Bilderberg austerity system.
Oh, okay, so I kind of distracted a bit from Bilderberg, but you think Greece was a large part of what they were discussing?
It was on the list, and no doubt with the IMF and Christine Lagarde at Bilderberg most years, you know, the IMF is basically is Team Bilderberg. They're a member, an adjunct of Bilderberg, like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute of International Affairs in England. You know, Bilderberg is the hub, and these are the spokes, as I've often said. And so, you know, Greece was high on their list, as were USA elections, which I've already discussed on your show, and cybersecurity and a number of issues, Russia, Ukraine, and that whole squeeze that the UN and NATO and the EU are putting on Putin. So these things all go hand in hand at Bilderberg like links of a chain. And so there is a definite connection in the Bilderberg-connected IMF wanting to be the economic hitman, if you will, and put the Greeks under the thumb.
So, I mean, in terms of the sort of, I mean, these are all obviously agenda items that you're listing, but is there any firm information come out yet about any outcomes from that?
About Bilderberg in general, or about?
Well, if you assume that, if you state that those things were on the Bilderberg agenda, is there any indication about any decisions that came out as a result of those discussions?
Not precisely. You have to keep in mind that it takes a while for Bilderberg's decisions to manifest themselves. but they always have uncanny timing. They're talking about Greece right before the fall, and they have very, very pivotal timing in all these issues, in all the deal making that they do, and behind the scenes sort of things like what I think amounts to insider trading for engineering contracts and deals like that, to take on Russia and all these matters. But in terms of the exact content of what Bilderberg discussed with regards to Greece, that's still being looked at and researched right now. But no doubt they played a role in guiding this through, just like their discussions nurtured the original Treaty of Rome that created the European Union in the first place, and that, of course, led to the Eurozone. A lot of what Bilderberg does is broad brushstrokes, long-term stuff. So they're nurturing this along and helping move the chessmen where they need to go in order to keep Greece in line.
Now, the subheadline to your American Friends of Bilderberg article is high-powered group holding other meetings we don't know about. What is, are you suggesting that is the case?
They're suggesting it. This is what's really interesting. Again, Bilderberg is not just the immediate quick decisions, deal making, and insider trading type things that I'm talking about. They're largely long-term creation of the EU, creation of the Eurozone, the big brushstrokes, as I emphasize. But in their own tax returns in the U.S., Bilderberg has an American element. And I can talk about history in a moment, but Bilderberg was largely created in America, at least to a very significant extent back in the 1950s. And so there's this American branch or wing of Bilderberg, and they have their own funding mechanism. And because of that, though, they have to file what's called a 990 form with the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. And that sheds a little bit of light on their funding, as that article explains, and how they fund the American part of it. And in so doing, the article explains, and this article can be obtained by contacting American Free Press, americanfreepress.net. It explains how they, in filling out the form and meeting that tax form's requirements, they allude to having the American Friends of Bilderberg sponsors various conferences, other meetings on the problems of the Western Alliance, and they fund the annual Bilderberg meetings. So that means there's something besides the Bilderberg meetings in their precise language on that form. And now I'm in the process of figuring out exactly what other meetings the American Friends of Bilderberg are funding besides helping fund the Bilderberg meetings themselves, the ones that we know about, the ones that we follow every year. So we need to know exactly what they're doing and what they're putting together. And so that's coming soon, I think, in terms of figuring out what those other meetings are.
I mean, some people do suggest that, in fact, the once-a-year Bilderberg meeting itself is a bit of it has become in recent years a bit of a red herring in the sense that is not where the main business is done. Is this where you're going with your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think this is concrete evidence that the Bilderberg meetings are part of a bigger group of meetings, just like the different organizations like the IMF squeezing Greece are different spokes of the Bilderberg hub. I strongly suspect and believe that Bilderberg is part of probably a series of quarterly meetings. Keep in mind that the brother group, the Trilateral Commission, meets 3 or 4 times a year, and they're actually larger than Bilderberg. That's like 400 and some meeting every year versus Bilderberg, which is around 140, and that counts the steering committee. So, yeah, there's a more multifaceted thing going on here. I mean, we know about the think tanks, Brookings, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, the Council on Foreign Relations. It could be some of their functions that are these other meetings, but I think it's more than that. And it's just a matter of getting at what they are. But this is the Bilderberg, the American wing of Bilderberg. This is their own admission on a tax form that they fund other meetings, and they won't allude to what they are, but they're problems of the Western Alliance, they say, quote unquote. And of course, that was the language of the beginning of Bilderberg. They wanted to solve the problems of the Western Alliance and unify Europe. That was the very roots of Bilderberg.
Okay, and in your list of agenda items there, you didn't mention free trade agreements. Was TPP and TTIP were on the agenda this year, were they not?
Well, those things are always on the agenda for Bilderberg because those are the broad brushstrokes that they want to put in place. Whether they're on their specific discussion list or not doesn't really matter. I think I mentioned before that Klaus Kleinfeld, the CEO of Alcoa, which is a metals giant, is on the steering committee, and his Business Roundtable, which is one of the strongest lobbies in Washington, was busy grinding away at U.S. congressmen that didn't want to get on board for fast track authority for Obama right during Bilderberg. So the connections of the Bilderberg members to their own organizations that they're the heads of or that they're the CEOs of, those organizations carry out a lot of the arm twisting and lobbying in conjunction with Bilderberg. That's how it works, which gives Bilderberg a little plausible deniability. But Kleinfeld's Business Roundtable was twisting a lot of those arms that ended up giving Obama the fast track he needed for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP as you called it. But that's how it works.
Which brings us nicely onto the TPP, because the last time we spoke, actually Obama had just lost the vote in the Senate for the fast track. But obviously that's a number of weeks ago now. What happened? Bring us up to date on that. What happened since then?
Well, they did some adjustments where there was some legislation to help people that were displaced or unemployed because of free trade. Now that, briefly, that's real telling in and of itself. Why do you need legislation to help people who lose their jobs under free trade unless they are in fact going to lose their jobs under free trade? So they're setting up a safety net for people that lose their jobs while at the same time saying that the TPP is going to create a whole bunch of jobs. I mean, that's just suspicious on its face. But that being said, this thing was reapproved in the Senate after the Senate turned it down, making these adjustments I'm referring to. And then they really went full guns at the House. And as I mentioned, the Bilderberg Business Roundtable, Bilderberg linked Business Roundtable was involved in that. And they all sides were on the House. They bent as many arms as they could, and they got the House to pass it. I think it was 63-38 without the vote right in front of me. It was something like that. And that was late June that the House passed it, and thereby giving Obama this fast track that he needs to finish not only the Trans-Pacific trade deal, but the transatlantic one that's so dear to Bilderberg and its satellites.
So let me just understand this then. They got a wrong answer in Senate and basically just kept going back until they got the right answer. Is that what the modern definition of democracy is? Yeah,
exactly. They made a deal on that bill whereby people could get compensated for losing their jobs under this job-creating bill that we're told about. It's all very, very contradictory and really, really rather revolting. And so, yeah, that's exactly right. They just kind of gerrymandered it around until they got it through the Senate, and then they sent it over to the House, after first losing in the Senate. Obama betrayed his Democratic Party. He betrayed the big unions. I think we all know that. And but this way it's going to affect Britain as well, of course, with the transatlantic trade deal, where they talked about creating a whole new common market and merging the U.S. and EU regulatory systems. I will mention on a footnote that, of course, Martin Wolf in the Financial Times was talking with Citigroup and with Goldman Sachs representatives who are Bilderberg organizations. Martin Wolf is a Bilderberg journalist, and right before Bilderberg, they're talking about the concerns among the elite of Brexit, that Britain might leave the European Union. I want to remind your viewers of that. That's a real big concern among the Bilderbergers. They're concerned about Greece leaving the Eurozone, and we've talked about Greece already today, but they're also very concerned about Britain leaving the EU.
Well, it's interesting because one of the aspects of the Greek situation that is being discussed in Europe is the possibility that the stress and the tension built up around the whole Greek situation is going to be used to push through more federalization of Europe, in the sense of creating a European treasury and a European, so to go with the European Central Bank. So that actually removes another layer of national sovereignty from the Euro nations. And alongside the issue of the Brexit, the British exit of the European Union, I've mentioned this on the program a couple of times. David Cameron has been travelling in the last few months around Europe, speaking to European leaders about Britain's relationship with Europe and the renegotiations that are being renegotiations, I say in inverted commas, because of course there is no renegotiation going on. But the price for any concessions from Europe with regard to immigration and the open borders policy into Britain is likely to be the formalisation of the European Army and the European Foreign Office and European foreign policy. So here we've got two agenda items from Bilderberg, which are being used in a sense to formalise European federalism.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is a pretty large part of the agenda, it seems.
Definitely. And they were talking about this 2 years ago at the Brookings Institution, one of the big Bilderberg think tanks. The United States of Europe, which has been on the lips of European unification people since the 1940s, and a all-powerful European Central Army, strengthening the European Central Bank to make it more like the Federal Reserve, and last but not least, fiscal union, where the budgeting and taxes of each nation within the EU would be centralized in Brussels. These things have been on the Bilderbergers' minds a number of years, and they really started gaining steam 2 years ago at Brookings at a meeting I attended in Washington. And then these things are still going in the pages of the Bilderberg-connected newspapers, such as Martin Wolf and the Financial Times. They keep repeating the same mantra: fiscal union, banking union, European Army, United States of Europe, and ideas going back decades to some extent. So again, broad brushstrokes for Bilderberg.
Okay, well, just to finish off then, and just getting back to TPP and TPIP, sorry, excuse me for a second.
Yeah.
There's this article here in the Register from a few days ago, really suggesting that, okay, Obama's got his fast track, but there is quite a bit of opposition in other countries that are involved in these trade deals. What's your view on opposition in other countries? Because obviously the TPP in particular requires that every nation ratifies it. Otherwise, no nation can have it, basically. So all the people that are in the process at the moment all have to agree, or it doesn't go through. So in other words, there can't be a TPP with 8 out of 10 of the members. I can't remember exactly how many members there are in this, but you can't have a TPP with 8 out of the 10. Everybody has to agree. What is the possibility that this could still be derailed by one of the other nations?
Well, it's probably reasonably good. You know, that you bring up a good point, Mike. I haven't looked much at the other 11 nations besides the U.S. that are signing on to this on both sides of the Pacific. It even includes, keep in mind, Mexico and Canada, who are already members of NAFTA along with the U.S., those 3 nations. And so, you know, there's kind of a grafting onto NAFTA of TPP that's going on, the NAFTA nations. You know, maybe the Aussies, the Australians, will have a little bit more gumption and more of a populist impulse against this thing, but they're going to have to be strong. I mean, the arm bending in the States was overwhelming, especially when this thing was left up to the House of Representatives. I don't have a crystal ball on that one, but if they have to get the ratification of each, then that does provide at least a little bit of a margin of safety. If just a couple of nations, 2 or 3 of them, can cry foul and say, we don't like the looks of this. They really worked on Japan a lot before this all was coming to a head. And I think Japan fell into line from what I've seen. Their leader even addressed the House of Representatives recently, which is, it's been a long time since the Japanese prime minister has addressed the House or addressed Congress. So, and that was largely, you know, an indication that he's capitulated on the fast track and the TPP. But yeah, you raise a good point. Hopefully Australia and others New Zealand will, put the brakes on this thing and slow it down and buy time. Because one thing the Congress could do, just to kind of wrap up here, is that even though they gave Obama fast track, they could simply say no to the TPP itself. They're allowed to go in a room and look at an early draft of it, but they can't take any photos. They can't take any physical notes. They can't take any video. They can't do anything that records what they see in this sequestered room on Capitol Hill to go look at an earlier version of the Trans-Pacific Treaty. So that alone should raise all sorts of red flags. So really, Congress should simply say dead on arrival. If we can't amend this thing and we have to vote up or down, then the answer is no. But hopefully they'll get plenty of help from other nations before that time comes.